All right, how did I introduce this last time?
Do it
How did we
different.
do this? This is the
This is
Welcome to the Butter What podcast.
butter.
We don't know
What?
that it's a podcast, but it's a podcast. I'm Pat. This is our co-host here, BrianMcMoses.com.
Hello.
And this time we're going to talk about Tailscale. All the things on our outline here are about Tailscale, the Mesh VPN.
Tailscale's
And
fantastic.
it is fantastic. I'm going to ask you because we both already know the answer. What on earth is a Mesh VPN?
I have no
Is this
idea.
like
I'm
privateinternetaccess.com where I go and get my own, like an anonymous IP address so that nobody knows it's me when I'm at the
not
coffee shop?
not really, but maybe you could, right? I mean, if what's the right way to
But
say
that's
that?
not the
If
goal.
somebody,
That's not what I
yeah,
would.
that's not the goal. The goal of Tailscale is to allow somebody to create a mesh network of encrypted point-to-point encrypted tunnels.
And
Um,
the idea would be every machine on your Tailscale network can connect directly to every other machine on your network.
Yeah, regardless of what network,
Location.
location or network that they're actually connected to.
My phone can be with me in Japan, and I could talk to my Octoprint server here at home and start a 3D print.
You could.
And my Octoprint server can write my time lapse to a NAS in Canada, and that all over Tailscale, and that would just work.
That would just work, and it's easy to set up. There's no firewall rules. There's there's nothing. I mean,
Nothing.
one of the funny things about all of this is that on a couple different occasions I've tried to set up some kind of VPN at home to access stuff on my local network here remotely, and I don't know where I get bogged down. Certificates and I firewall rules. I don't want to say I don't want to sound dumb, but I look at it and I go, it's too much work to understand what this is. I'm just not going to do it. And I
Yep.
can't remember when it was, but you encouraged me. You said you should take a look at Tailscale. And I said to you, Pat, no, I'm too simple. I don't understand VPNs. I can't do it. And you said, no, you've got to believe me. And I was like, no, Pat, you don't understand. My tiny little lizard brain doesn't understand VPNs.
It's true.
And
He had no idea. He was very upset.
I can't remember when it actually clicked. Well, it's like, okay, fine. Pat keeps saying it, and Pat's got to be right. So I'm gonna go try it out. And like an hour later, I had my laptop, my desktop computer, my phones, my tablets, all running Tailscale, and hitting things in betwixt and in between them. And it was really interesting.
Can I tell you my little story?
Please.
It's well, first I wish I had Tailscale 10 years ago because I worked for a company that had I was the IT department for a company that had 20 or 25 what most companies would call sales offices, with two or three customer facing people in each little 3-room office, and that was all they had. I bought a big stack of WRT54G routers. I loaded OpenWRT and OpenVPN on them. Did all that certificate nonsense you're talking about. And I drove these out to 20 some locations. And it was fantastic. But boy, you don't need that. None of that would have been necessary today with Tailscale. And when we moved into this house 3 years ago, I have an open WRT router. I put WireGuard on there, a WireGuard server, and I got it working. It was fine. I never used it. And something randomly happened. Like 3 months later, my wife was bothering me because the internet wasn't working. And I don't know what kind of goofy nonsense happened by itself on the router, but all the traffic was trying to go out that WireGuard interface, the encrypted, which doesn't make any sense. So I just said, well, I want to go back to bed. I turned the WireGuard interface off. Everything just worked. And since I never needed to use it, I never turned it back on again. And then I got Tailscale, and I've never looked back.
It's perfect. I mean,
Is that
it really is. I mean,
I've got like 15 or 20 devices on Tailscale. And some of the things that we've talked about in what I hope are previous episodes by this point. Like, Brian, you've got Tailscale on your Pi KVM, don't you?
I do. Yeah,
Because I do too. It's the
yeah,
best place for it.
we both do. So we've each got the ability with Tailscale to take one of our Pi KVMs and ship it off to. I don't want to pick on my parents because they're older and maybe technically challenged, but theoretically, I could ship it across the country. They could plug it in the network, plug it into their computer, and I could access that just like I could if it was right here.
You can't even tell the difference
Yep.
unless they're far enough away that
Latency,
latency
yeah.
makes it slower. But yeah, it just. And I was amazed because I built a device. I built a Raspberry Pi with a giant 14 terabyte hard drive, and I loaded C-File on it. And C-File is kind of like it's you host it yourself, but it works like Dropbox. It copies your files instantly from your laptop to your desktop to your phone and up to the server. So there's a copy of all my files on this Raspberry Pi. I'm going out of order, Tubby. I'm sorry.
You're
about
doing
that.
fine. I like the segue.
But and here's the little pictures of it here. It's just I thought about 3D printing or CNCing a fancy case for this, but it seemed easier to just use the case the hard drive came in, the case the Pi came in. I velcroed them together. I loaded Tailscale on there. I think I have 5 or 6 terabytes worth of data that I synced up there, and then I went over to Brian McMoses. He's that guy on the other end of the screen here. I went to his house and I left it with him. And when I left his house, by the time I got home, he'd already plugged it into his network. It was already connected. My machines were syncing before I even got home. It connected to Tailscale. Everything just worked.
It worked really well enough that I want to do the same thing. Probably not with C-File, but use a Raspberry Pi, an external hard drive, and probably some sort of ZFS file system so that I can do the exact same kind of remote backups of
The buddy system.
yeah. What's the crowdsourced? But I don't want to say buddy sourcing. That sounds weird. but yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. You're using friends and people that you trust to have an offsite but close enough entire backup of all the data that matters to you.
Yep.
Inexpensively. I mean, cheap.
And I used to host a C-File server on a co-located virtual machine in downtown Dallas here. And it was a pain because anytime there's a security update, you've got to get it on there yesterday, right? So it's a little stressful all the time. But with all this stuff hiding behind Tailscale, I mean, assuming everything's working right, only me and my machines that I own can get to that C-File server. I have it all firewalled off on the local network. Brian can't hit it without connecting to my Tailscale network somehow. And yeah, I don't have to if it pops up on my phone and says, "Oh, there's a 0-day exploit for C-File or Nginx or something." I say, "Oh, that's good. We can get to that one of these days." And I don't have to just drop everything and go work on that. That was terrible.
Well, what else are you doing with Tailscale, Pat?
What else am I doing? I'm going to have to check the list here. I don't know why. Well, I guess I do know why. I have Tailscale on my Octoprint server. Octoprint is what you use. A lot of people use. Most people load it on a Raspberry Pi, and you can control your 3D printer with it. You can send print jobs to it. You can... Basically, what you do is you go from your slicer. There's a button that says, "Do you want to send this job straight to your 3D printer?" And if you have it configured and pointed to your Octoprint server, it will just, do all the work for you. You don't have to upload any G code. You don't have to hit start. It just kind of goes. And this means I can monitor my prints. I don't have a camera on here anymore, though. But I can monitor my prints from my phone anywhere with without having to. I don't have to punch any holes in any firewalls. I don't have to run a VPN server on my router like I used to get in here. It just works securely and safely.
Yeah,
It's pretty boring. There's nothing going on my Octoprint server. Here.
we should have thought of that. You should have had a print going for this episode.
Well, we would have had to listen to it too.
Yeah.
That would have been a bummer.
Yep. Yeah, you got it working on yours, and I was like, well, I didn't really have a need to do it, but I did it. I did it anyways. I implemented Tailscale at home. You inspired me to implement Tailscale on my own OpenWRT router. You wound up putting it on your little travel router.
Yep.
Which means
this is pretty neat. I bought one of these. This was kind of an impulse buy. I had this old little travel router thing that we used to call the Wi-Fi dingus. It was just a 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi router with a battery in it. And if you were somewhere in the old days that only had wired network, you could plug it in. It turns into an access port. It's just one Ethernet port on the thing. And I think it died. Do you think it died, Brian? Or I don't know what happened to it. I have it. I know where it is. But then somehow I saw somebody on Twitter pointed me at these little GL iNet devices. They're routers that ship with OpenWRT. I said, oh, that's cool. And then I noticed they had a little $20 one with just 2 Ethernet ports and 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. So I just ordered one. And I didn't think about Tailscale at all at the time. But then I was putting Tailscale on everything. So I said, well, why not put it on this little router that sits in my laptop bag? And I'm a little bummed out that I chose the model that I chose, because if I spent $10 more, there would have been room for Tailscale on it. And there isn't. I have to have that little, you can see it in the picture here. There's I have a smaller one in there now, but there's a USB drive.
That is a ginormous USB drive.
Yeah, that was the one I had with me the day I was doing this. But I ordered one of those little SanDisk ones like you use on your NAS to put on there. But while I was doing this, Tailscale released the feature update where they did the relay nodes. So the subnet on this, the 192.168, I even kept its default subnet because I'm lazy. It's 192.168.8 dot everything. If I plug this in, you can ping it from my desktop. Any device that's connected to it, you can ping them, you can get to them.
Wherever it was plugged in.
Wherever it's plugged in, anywhere that it can access the internet. And I think that's pretty cool, and it hasn't come in handy yet, but I think it will.
Eventually, someday, maybe.
Someday.
Yeah, you using the Tailscale relay node feature on your travel router had me do the inverse. I have an OpenWRT router here for all of my network, and I used the relay node to just expose everything on Tailscale that's on my local network.
So you don't have to put Tailscale on all your devices. You just put it on your router and you can hit anything in your home.
Yeah, as long as it's still at my home and connected to that router. That's the bummer. Like, I mean, I guess.
Now, you know what the other bummer is? The relay nodes are part of the first paid tier for Tailscale. It's not a free option anymore.
It's what? I'll have to look at their
It's
prices.
not going to stop working. The Tailscale folks have pricing, but as far as I know, almost every feature is open to everyone.
Interesting.
Still, they haven't locked any features down.
Yeah. I haven't looked at the pricing, so maybe I'll walk that back a little bit. But so far, my experience with Tailscale has me eager to be their customer.
Yep, that's the only one that worries me. Everything else that we do with Tailscale is part of the free tier. You can have up to 100 machines.
Yep.
And my favorite feature about Tailscale that I'm about to tell you about is also, I believe, part of the free tier. And that's machine sharing.
Yes.
Isn't that fantastic? You go into the Tailscale interface and you can pick one of your computers and you can say, I want to share access to this machine. And it gives you a URL. And when somebody hits that, they'll either, if they're already a Tailscale user, it will just add it to their network. And if they're not a Tailscale user, it'll offer to let them sign up. And I'll tell you, Jeremy and I had, for the Creativity Podcast, we had issues sharing these giant video files that we're accruing right now in the hour and 20 minutes so far that
Holy
we've been
moly.
recording. And, like, our workflow was, I said, well, I'll pull down the videos from Riverside, edit them into a three-way video. And when I export that, I do that at ridiculously high bit rates so that when he edits it again, and maybe, if there were a chain of edits, we don't lose a lot. So these giant, 20, 30 gig files, neither of us had easy room at, Dropboxes and
Yep.
Google Drives and things to fit enough of these files. So I shared my C file server with them. And it probably took 10 minutes, an email with, and that was, I had to send him Tailscale, I had to send him the C file information, tell him where the client for C file was, but 15 minutes later he was connected to Tailscale and syncing with C file, with the C file client. And I think that's amazing.
That it really is.
So what I'm saying here is if you share a machine, like if you shared your print server, your Octoprint server with your friend in
A Minecraft
Tibet,
server. What
your Minecraft, that's I understand that's the biggest thing that they do.
is it really?
They keep hearing about is Minecraft servers.
Well, and are we past that day and age where people hosted their own game servers frequently?
No, because Minecraft, I think you have to.
Yeah. Well,
And it used to involve punching holes in firewalls so all the kids in the neighborhood can
Yep.
get to your.
I used Tailscale on my Trade Wars 2002 game server. But
Why do you do that, Tommy?
well, I did it because it's on an Azure virtual machine. I didn't use it so people could play it. I've just got the port open so that the internet can hit that port. But I had, because I'm lazy and cavalier, I had just left the remote desktop port open so that I could remotely access and work on that virtual machine. And that's a huge, I'm sure
Oh yeah.
one of our IT
Don't do
security
that.
friends is just blew his lid and is infuriated that I would do such a thing. That's a terrible
I'm
idea.
surprised that by now that's not as safe to leave open as an SSH port.
Yeah, that's
Reasonable lockdowns on the SSH server, at least.
that's interesting. Yeah, I don't understand why.
Like, if I turn off password authentication and only do private key authentication, I'm plenty brave enough to leave SSH open to the world.
Yeah.
I don't fear it at all.
But yeah, I closed that down. I followed a security best practice and closed down the remote desktop access to that through Tailscale on that machine. Added it, and now I just hit that. I hit that directly over Tailscale, still using remote desktop. I didn't have to change anything here locally except maybe the address.
Tailscale saved a tiny problem for me that I don't have often because I don't travel. But my laptop's a jumbo laptop. It has an SSD and a spinning drive, but it's a tiny spinner. I think it's only 1 terabyte. It's what I had laying around. It didn't come with one, and I just found the biggest one I had in a drawer and I put it in there.
A 3.5 inch or a 2.5 inch?
2.5.
Okay.
2.5. I don't have a lot of 2.5s around, so I don't sync with C-File everything to my laptop because there's just not enough room, especially for all the FPV videos and stuff. So I have to map a drive to my NAS VM. And, in theory, that means if I take my laptop to the park, I don't have access to any, or a hotel, I don't have access to any of my video files. But now I do. It was a lazy fix for a problem that I could have solved it with a bigger hard drive. I'd be happy with that too, but it's problem solved. I'm excited.
It is a problem solved.
The server that publishes
The Butterwhat blog.
the Jekyll blog
Yeah.
for butterwhat.com is a VM here next to me here. And we share that with Tails. I share it with Brian. That way, Brian doesn't have to figure out how to set up Jekyll on his Windows box, and he doesn't have to worry that setting up Jekyll on his Windows box might goof up his ancient Octopress setup for his blog.
It did.
And he just has to push to a Git repository on that VM. Now, somebody asked me once, why on earth would I have this stuff all hiding on a VM here? Why wouldn't I just, push to Git repositories on the internet? Netlify can publish Jekyll blogs for you. And I said, I'm terrified of making the mistake where I accidentally set a preview, an unpublished thing, or the whole back catalog of the blog to another URL that Google finds and starts indexing and then gets mad at me because my content exists in 5 different places and starts ranking me down. I'd rather hide all this stuff away behind a firewall so
Google can't get to it and get mad at
Yeah,
you.
Google can't get to it, and I feel much more comfortable and I worry a lot less. And the Jekyll machine, it does a git pull once a minute from GitLab, and if there's a new change, it publishes the blog. Is pretty much its MO, and it's a private Git repo, so Google's not going to accidentally find it. But that's a very basic use case.
Yeah,
But
well,
we use machine sharing, which is exciting.
Basic, but really handy. I mean, super handy for us.
It's true.
I mean,
This is true. Well, we're going to do it in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Should we announce? Now, see, I disagree with you and 3D Weeb that we should do an introduction, but I'm wondering if we should do an outro to put on the 4 of these potential videos. Like we do the live stream every first Tuesday or something. I don't even think we have to do it for this set of videos. I'm not too worried about it. But
that's not a bad idea to routinely say, hey.
Yeah, just routinely at the end of every episode say we do this every first Tuesday
of the month.
And
make sure to like and subscribe.
Yeah, make sure to
click
like and
the notification
subscribe.
Bell.
All those things will go in this outro.
Smash that stuff.
And I'm going to use this as our outro.
Oh, I hope that you do.
For all these videos. This nonsense that we're speaking
Patreon.
Right now.
We each have
Patreon. We do each have Patreon. And the URLs for those will be in the description. And if we were good at this, I would explain to you why it's a good idea to support us on Patreon. But I did not prepare for that, guys. So I have to apologize for that.
You too might want a butt sensor for your home automation, and your contributions on Patreon are a huge reason why we're able to make butt sensors.
It's true. I could not have made a butt sensor without the support of my patrons. And I'm not even